displays the percentage of men and women in different rankings of the workforce. At entry level, women make up 46%. It goes down from here to 37% at manager, 33% at senior manager or director, 29% at vice president, 24% senior VP, and 19% C-suite. Today's panelists beat the odds, and they are here today to share their stories that include how they made it possible to rise to positions of leadership. Now I'm going to hand over the mic to Victoria Rosa Garcia, Director of the Welch Experience, who will be facilitating this discussion.
Thank you so much, Christina. So I'm going to introduce our lovely panelists for today in our Women in Business. We have Cindy Bigelow, CEO and President of Bigelow Tea. We have Suzanne Greco, former CEO of Subway Restaurants. We have Elizabeth Heiza, Chief of Staff of Barnum Financial Group. And we have Jennifer Tombaugh, President of Tauk Travel. And so we're going to just dive right into our first question. And actually, before we do that, let's do some testimonies first. How about Cindy, if you don't mind starting off, just giving us a little insight into your college to career journey.
Is this good? So I went to Boston College many moons ago. And then from there, I worked for a company called Joseph Seagram's and sold liquor, which was very fun. And I worked for a division called General Wine and Spirits, and it actually had 106 individuals in this particular division, 100 men and 6 women. And that's a story for another day. From there, I then went to Kellogg Graduate School, which was something that I knew I wanted to do. I didn't really know what the timing was, and then after just a couple of years of working with Seagram's, I said, I think it's time. From there, I majored in finance, marketing, and sort of minored in organizational behavior, and that's when I started at Bigelow full-time as the cost accountant. I actually, yes, this tells you my age, I was the woman with the first PC in the whole company. And so from there, I actually had quite the journey where I really, every 3 or 4 years, moved to another division and learned the division and how to meet the new people or meet the people, learn how to run it, how to establish my own relationships, figure out the problems, have my own fights, kind of keep those personal and not share them inside the family, and slowly worked my way up to the position that I am today. About 2005, I started running the company as a CEO and president. But that journey along the way, and we'll have a little bit more time to talk about that, is really, I think, was immeasurable to the leader that I hope that I am today, because it's a lot of those sometimes knocks in life that what you're doing as you're moving up the ladder, and some of those issues are really what helped define you. So it was an interesting journey in every single department, but I do think it helped really allow me to run Bigelow Tea, hopefully successfully. Well, we'll keep that going for the future. Anyway, so that's been my journey.
I had it's kind of a little bit more interesting in the sense that I wasn't fluid for 4 years of college straight through. So I started at Subway. My brother is the founder of Subway, so I grew up in Subway in the back of the restaurant and worked my teen years working inside Subway restaurants as sandwich artist, and did a lot of other jobs. My parents were very much involved, and I did different types of work like ordering supplies and training employees. And I wanted to stay local, and I lived in Bridgeport right down the street off of Madison Avenue at Aimridge Condominium. And I decided to come to Sacred Heart because it was convenient for me to get an education as well as be able to still work. So I did that for about 1.5 years, and I decided that maybe I didn't want to be in business. I started with the accounting program, and I didn't like that very much. Matter of fact, I despised it. And I don't know how I got through my accounting courses, but I did. I really hated accounting, but I said, this isn't for me. And so I decided to go up to Hartford to take a teacher training program. This is before universities had any type of dance majors or anything like that, to become a dance instructor. And I continued to study inside, in and out of Manhattan for the various forms of dance, and I was busy with that, and I was busy with teaching dance and performing and making costumes. And then I got to a point after doing that for 10 years that I said, you know what, I'm getting older, this isn't getting any easier. Your body starts to not do all the things it used to do when it was in your early 20s. It becomes more of a struggle. So I said, well, I'll go back home and I'll go back to work for Subway, which is what I did. Now here I am, as you could well imagine, no 4-year degree, being a female, and coming out of the arts. I really was the stereotypical, she couldn't possibly know anything, she's just Fred's sister. And I started working in operations, which is what I really knew, which was the basic operations, and I went back to school at night. And I would say to anybody sitting here, just keep at it, don't take that break, because it took me forever working full-time during the day to gain the credibility in the office and with my peers. As at the time I joined Subway, there were 715 restaurants. At the time I left, recently I retired, there were over 46,000 restaurants in 103 countries. So as this company was really growing and we were expanding into these various countries and dealing with the different people, I had to gain my own credibility. And my brother didn't make it easy for me. He wanted to be sure that I was not given any raise or promotion or anything without earning it. And as you'll see in many of the studies, that this is very common for women, but I think I kind of had a little bit more difficult path. It should have been easier, I would think. If you're related, it sounds like it should be easier, but it wasn't easier. And then obviously not having the 4-year degree made it even harder to really push ahead. So I got through the business degree here at Sacred Heart. I continued here and finished it. And I did it at night. And then I continued to just prove myself time and time again until I earned my way to the top. And there were a lot of unfortunate reasons as to how I got to where I was along the way, but I was always there. I never felt bitter about the fact that I wasn't given the opportunity the first time around, but I really wanted to prove myself, and I think it's just the persistence that kept me going, and the love for the company and the love for the family business.
I went to Bryant College in Rhode Island for my undergrad. I always knew that I wanted to be in business in the corporate world, but I didn't really know in what capacity. So Bryant was definitely the place for me. I had an amazing experience there. After college, it definitely took me a little while to get a job. I think through a Monster ad, I got a job at SHU in Milford, the razor company, in their research facility. So the job was in marketing research. So anyone who's a marketing major, you know there's 1,000 different versions of marketing, right? And that specific one was marketing research. So my job there was to do both quantitative and qualitative research on people using the Intuition razor and the Quattro razor for men. So I would have to stand behind a two-way mirror and watch men shave and watch women shave, and then analyze videotape of these people shaving and how they held the razor, how many times they got cut. Appreciate your razor, everybody in the room, because a lot of time and money goes into them. So that was, I did that for about 2 years, and it actually was fun, almost like Seagram's, where I'm sure that was the beauty industry. So we got samples of every type of luxury brand of creams and makeup and everything, because they wanted us to put it in the formula. So that was a really fun job, but I knew at the end of the day it wasn't for me. It was a little too scientific and a little too niche. So through another Monster ad, I applied for a job at Barnum Financial Group, which is where I am now, and I've been there ever since. So the job I applied for was to be in their marketing department, and I didn't really know what it was or what it meant, but I just took it, and for the first 6 months, I hated it. Hated it wasn't even a word. My parents felt bad for me. I hated it so much. Where you cry on the way home every day, where you just, there was some reason why I didn't like it so much, but there was also a reason why I didn't leave. And then one day, everything just started to click with me more, and I started to ask more questions, to meet more people, to put myself out there more. And then I just understood what the business was, and I've been obsessed with what we do ever since there. And I've been there for 15 years now. I started as the marketing assistant, then I was the director of marketing, and now the chief of staff to the CEO, which means a lot of different things. But similar to Suzanne, I started my undergrad, I did my undergrad, but I started my graduate degree about 7 years ago. And then I got pregnant, and then got pregnant again, and got pregnant again. So I took like a 7-year gap in between my degree, and I agree, I wish I had just done it from the beginning and didn't stop when the kids were little, because now I'm finishing my graduate degree, going to classes at night, and I'm about 4 classes away from it, so I can't wait to be done. But it's completely worth it, and I love every class, and I enjoy the journey of learning every day in school, but also in the workplace as well.
So I left West Virginia at 17 and had a real great luck of being at Harvard, where I thought I was going to be an economics major, and then about a month then I was going to be a government major, and then I fell back to my old thing that I could be possibly good at, which was English and American literature. So if you want to know anything about that, I can tell you all about Fitzgerald. And had an amazing experience there, and actually got a taste of what not knowingly, what I do now, and had the opportunity to run a student travel agency, actually, a student-run travel agency on campus as just a work job, which turned out many years later to be actually what I get to do professionally. Who knew? And after college, I worked at a consulting firm called Monitor Company, does strategy consulting. Sort of, we were competitors at the time with Bain and BCG and McKinsey, and then they were bought by Deloitte a few years ago and folded as part of their organization, and was incredibly challenged. It was the smartest group of people I ever worked with. I was completely intimidated, and I got the best advice actually from a female mentor there who said, you know, you're welcome to come back after graduate school, but I really would suggest you not. That was hard to hear. There was a lot of tears, but she was absolutely right. And I saw Kate the other day, and I told her, I said, "Ooh, what great advice you gave me," because she knew that that wasn't my passion, and I was sort of forcing myself to do something that I thought was the right thing, and it really wasn't the right thing for me. And so I did go back to business school at Harvard. I can't imagine doing this while you're working at the same time. God bless you guys. Then from that, I was trying to do a little soul searching of what did I really want to do then, since I wasn't going to go back to consulting. And I really love the beverage industry too, and I went to work for Coca-Cola down in Atlanta on Fresca and Diet Sprite, if any of their die-hard Fresca and Diet Sprite drinkers out there. Really enjoyed that. I had interned on the Powerade brand. We launched Powerade. That was I had a giant thing of Powerade strapped to my back as I ran around Chicago Stadium during the World Cup a zillion years ago, sampling. So that was terrific, and that was a really, really fun business to be in. But then there's this relationship thing that came into be. So my boyfriend, now husband at the time, was a classmate of mine at business school, and he had gone off to Taiwan to work for another classmate and said, "Why don't you come over?" So I got on a plane and I flew to Taipei. I spoke no Chinese, no Mandarin, and I interviewed with anybody who would talk to me. It was crazy. I think I had 25 interviews in 1 week because I was just desperate to have some sort of job of doing anything. And I got hired, luckily, by a couple who was running the Leo Burnett advertising offices in Taipei at the time, and they needed someone to work with their Western clients. And it turned out Coca-Cola was one of their clients, as was Heineken and Johnny Walker and a lot in the sort of beverage field, and as well as Procter & Gamble and Kellogg. And it was the best opportunity for an expat to learn about culture, because I was standing behind, not shaving, but seeing how people wash their windows in the morning, or what cereals they ate, or what was the beer culture like. And so it was a great way to learn about that culture. But when you're an expat, so we lived there, my husband was there 5 years, I was there 3.5. But there's a time where you kind of go, am I going to stay here forever? And by the way, I would sit in meetings for the first, pretty much the whole time, but especially the first 6 months, where it was like watching a tennis match. They would be talking back and forth. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. And every now and then someone would lean over and say, oh, you know, they like the color blue on that sheet. I'm like, great, you know. So you kind of figure it out, and again, enough to get around. But it was pretty terrifying, I will say. Really pushed my limits in terms of comfort zone. But then we left. We decided we would move on and try and move back to the U.S., not knowing what we were going to do. It was the dot-com bubble. You know, we had a lot of friends, you know, making tons of money, doing all this cool internet, whatever. And we decided to go backpacking around Asia for 6 months with literally anything we had on our back. And it was the best thing that we did because we were in Nepal. We went offline for 3 weeks. We came back and the whole market had collapsed. Like we literally lost half of our savings, and we thought, okay, it's time to go back and get a job. So we came back and we ended up in Connecticut because my husband's family was here while we were trying to figure out what the heck we were going to do next. And because of travel, my mom is German, my parents always inculcated travel in our lives. I thought, well, maybe I'll do something adventure travel in Asia. And there's really nothing in Connecticut that had that. My husband sort of landed at a fuel cell company first, so we knew we were going to stay here. But then I read about Talc, and that year was the year we won World's Best in Travel and Leisure. I thought, who's this company? I'd never heard of them before. So I went down and I interviewed 18 years ago, and I've never walked into a place where literally I've had an interview where the president was crying talking about his family's experience reading our guest comment cards. And I thought, okay, this is different. I was interviewing with a lot of companies that was talking about financial returns and what the job opportunities and very pragmatic about it. But I had never been in a place where someone had that much passion for what they do. And I thought, well, this is a different place. And if I get an opportunity to work here, I would take it in a heartbeat. And I did. And so since I've been at Talc, I was hired to launch our family travel line. That was so again, business plan. Someone walked in the door and said, here, figure this out. I'm like, okay, I really know what I'm doing. I've never worked in this industry before. But you make a lot of connections and friendships, and you start to work through people, and that was it's what you all do every day here at school, and that makes it really helpful to kind of set you up for opportunity and growth and just learning from others. And so over time, and between having 4 kids, every time I went away on maternity leave, I came back to a different job. I don't know what that meant. It's a little hint. Maybe I should time to move on. But I have 4 kids. I now run our operations, guest relations, reservations, sales, brand, and marketing groups. And it's been a terrific ride. And I've been in my role as president for I think 5-6 years now. It's the first non-family one, still a family-owned company, so that introduces a lot of interesting experiences, as you all mentioned, in a different way, coming in as a complete outsider. But it's been a joy, and it's a fantastic stars for every day.
Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing. We're going to start and jump right into our questions, and I'm going to start with Suzanne. The first question is going to be, what obstacles did you have to overcome in order to break the glass ceiling in your career path? And I know you just spoke on a few of those in your testimony, but any other ones?
Well, I think that whether we want to recognize it or not, there is a bias, and it's an unconscious bias that occurs. I don't think that people are saying, well, it's a woman, mentally and saying, well, we're not going to support her or whatever, but there is a stereotype there that, women, when they're born, they're not really groomed to be leaders, so to speak. Typically, in families, I'm Italian, so in an Italian family, the first man is born, the first son, and that is going to be, it's a stereotype, but that's how it is in the families. My grandparents came from Italy. That's how they treated my brother. That's how they treated all the men in our family. And I think it's very common that men are treated to be born leaders. Women go to college, and many times I think families don't even think that they're really going to progress. I guess the hope is that they find some guy at school that has a good education that's going to care for their family. But my mother was pretty strong, and she worked her whole life, and my family was big on education, and there was a lot of push for the fact that women should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So I think that that was a big part of it, which is you're dealing with an unconscious bias. Men tend to get promoted in corporations more quickly because they have a promise, or they look like they're going to, or they sound as if they have potential. Women have to constantly prove themselves over and over and over again to get that same promotion. And it's really, I think, persistence is what got me to where I am. And just, I didn't really look at it that way. It wasn't until I read a recent study on this that this is what's going on in the world. And now that I'm retired and actually can sit and reflect back, I'm sitting here saying, wow, how many times did I try to prove myself? How come that person got that promotion and I didn't? I never really dwelled on it or looked at it that way, and I guess just being naive to it was probably a good thing, because it might have bothered me if I really put too much thought into it. But there is that unconscious bias that is going on, and I think it's the persistence that really helped me through.
Any other ladies want to add to that, or?
I think that there's a lot of glass ceilings, right? I don't know if I believe it's just one. I think that the story I shared about hating my job and then loving it, that was a huge glass ceiling that I broke. I can probably think of a handful of times in my career where I've broken a glass ceiling, and really I feel like that's that you're persistent to finding that aha moment when you finally realize something. I think a lot of it has to do with finding your confidence, being persistently confident, right? Having a growth mindset, meaning that just because, I had this stigma to myself that I was never really a great math student. I never did good in my math courses, and I couldn't stand them. I'm barely getting through my accounting courses now on my graduate degree. We're gonna get there, but barely. So I always just said, I could never design a compensation plan, or I could never understand the true financials of how my company works. Like, I just kind of labeled myself as being bad at math. And when I finally was confident enough to say that's not true, I may need to work a little harder, I may need to apply myself more, it may take me longer to do something than a peer, but if I apply myself, I could do it. And once I started doing that over and over and over again, I started breaking tons of glass ceilings and having a ton of those aha moments that just propelled me forward in so many different ways.
That is so true. I think sometimes we hurt ourselves more than we need to. And there's been lots written on this too, right? But when you were talking, there were so many moments that were coming back in my memory of exactly that, of thinking that, oh, I'm not that. I will also say, though, especially if you do decide to have a family, one of the things that's really, really important is building a network of support, physical support and emotional support. Because there's a lot of work, and especially in more recent years, where a couple starting a relationship will say that work will be shared equally. And typically, sometimes that does happen, and bless those people. Often it doesn't, and it usually falls into the woman. In heterosexual relationships, it falls into the woman to take care of most of that work. And it's hard. Let me tell you, there are times where I have gone into work with 2 hours of sleep, and it wasn't necessarily a glass ceiling per se, but it could have barely, there are a lot of times where women do decide, for a lot of really good reasons, to take a different route. But it comes back to being persistent, to not labeling yourself, and making sure you have a support network to get you through those challenging times. And that can be just physically having someone help you with coordinating your life, whether it's a babysitter or a friend or someone to help run carpool, but also emotional. And this is what I love about why you're doing this forum and just being up here, like listening to you all. You need to have other people that you can talk to about the experiences that you're having, because I think, at least for me, a lot of times I really internalize it going, oh, I just feel this way. And then you start realizing, no, actually there's a lot of other people that do as well, and there's things that you can learn from each other. And that took a lot, even more recently, even in the last 3 or 4 years, that was a big revelation for me to go like, oh, okay, there are other people that have those same struggles, and I never really thought about that, and I think the more that there are support networks for men and women together to kind of work through those issues and have a dialogue about it, I think it makes us all stronger.
Just to add to it, because I know we have to move on to the other questions, but I think just having the dialogue, like you're saying, Jennifer, is important to be able to have these kind of communications and talk about these issues. We're doing some coding work in Bridgeport, and it was interesting to talk to the head of coding. And they said they're doing a coding program for women. And they say when you bring young males in and you do coding with them, they don't care. They make a lot of mistakes, and they push the ball forward, and there's a lot of coding. If you go to the women, the young girls, and you see what their screens are, they're empty. And they say, well, what have you been doing? And then if you go back and you push the undo, you see that they've deleted it because they didn't want to make any mistakes. And so I think that's okay to have that conversation and to challenge yourself. I know, early on, I think, not all women are the same, not all men are the same, and not everybody's meant to be a leader. But, I learned early on that, we are, for the most part, we're not that comfortable saying, can I have this? And I'd like to make this much money. It just sort of maybe kind of goes against maybe your grain, where you're here for the greater good, which is what I want to stand for, the greater good. So, you can't change your persona, but you can recognize the limitations that we have with maybe we don't want to make a mistake. Maybe we don't want to, ask for that title and that salary and say, how do I make that part starting early on? How do I make that part of who I am in my own style to start asking and recognizing I can make mistakes?
I think that's great, and it leads us into our next question, and I'm going to have you just carry the ball on that. Is, in your opinion, what do you think the biggest challenge women have to overcome in order to be a successful leader in business?
Well, as I just said earlier, I don't believe all men are going to be phenomenal leaders, and I don't believe all women are going to be phenomenal leaders. I think it's very independent. But the first thing I would say for women in general, and this I can say to women, not men, don't identify yourself as a woman. I mean, if you go into this, this is just my opinion, I have never gone into a setting saying I'm a woman. I'm a leader that happens to be a woman, and as a woman, I have certain qualities that I happen to think are very beneficial, and I might have some qualities I certainly need to work on. So the first thing is, in my opinion, is really thinking of yourself as a leader. The next thing for me, what I see with women, and I've had, and ladies, I'm sure the same, where people have come in and they've said, we'd like to have you help mentor this woman to help get to a higher level position in a company. Because they want to try to be conscious of that. And there's so many things I could list about that, and you guys, I'm sure you'll add into on what takes it to be a good leader, and you have to define that yourself, and what do you think that you're bringing to the table. But one thing I think is very important is the ability to communicate better than anybody else in the room. You have to be the most articulate. So whether you're seeing someone in the room that is clearly not really either looking at you in the eyes because you're a female and is only talking to the males in the room, you've got to be very, very observant, so underline observant. You have to watch that. You can't get all upset that, oh, he's not looking at me, and, well, that's just ridiculous. Don't worry about it. Note it. Do something about it. Listen to them long enough, and then start to add to the conversation. Gee, Fred, I heard what you said. I think that's a really good point, and I think we can add to that if we do this. You've got to be a very good communicator, and you really need to practice that early on. I don't think any of us, when we were your age, which I think I can maybe remember being your age, maybe. I'm sure we weren't phenomenal communicators back then, but as we were moving up and as we were wanting to move up, we had to really learn to be incredibly articulate. So that would be one lesson for me, for sure. Really develop your communication skills.
Did anybody else want to add to that?
I like the sharing mic thing.
I don't know if I have a whole lot to add other than I just think that being a leader, people don't necessarily, I didn't think of myself as being a leader, but I think people lead with different types of styles. And I think that the diversity in corporations of having men and women together are better than just a male-dominant corporation, because any product, whether it be the Schick razor or travel or the tea or Subway, women are purchasers as well. and they make a lot of the purchasing decisions for their families. They also influence how their children think for future purchases. And many of these large corporations don't have enough women in the upper levels to help make those decisions, and so that products, as they're being developed, as marketing is being done, that they're attracting and they're designed for both men and women. I think it's very, very critical. So the leadership part really comes around understanding how to put yourself forward to get those ideas and opinions out there to help a company become more creative and more innovative. Because I think in many cases what you find in many corporations in a meeting room, there might be only 1 or 2 women in the meeting. And if they might feel intimidated because they're hearing how men think and talk, which is one way, but women have different ideas, and I think it's very important to share ideas. And what you find is that the men respect what you think and say. They'll listen and say, that, I didn't think of it that way. Well, you think differently than we do, and that's how I think you really gain the respect. Being quiet, like you said, the communication is important, but it's really getting your ideas across without being intimidated that those other people, you might be that minority or that 20%, but it's important that they hear your point of view and they really respect it. But you just have to get out there and not be intimidated that you're one of the only women maybe sitting at that meeting room, at that table, at that board meeting, or presenting to a group of men. It's really getting over that and just understanding that yes, we are different, yes, we might think different, we manage differently. Women tend to be more empathetic, but they still understand business and know that the bottom line is important. And how do you grow a business? It's by growing the sales and profits, but they do it in a different way. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. That was great. That was a great insight. Moving on to the next question, Elizabeth. As a woman in business, how important is having a mentor?
As a woman in business, as anybody in business, I think it's important to have a mentor. In life in general, it's important to have a good network around you, but especially as a woman in business. It's just common sense, right, that you could go somewhere on your own, right? If I said I wanted to get to Boston right now, I could try to drive myself, or I could get a map and guide myself. So a mentor is just that person, right? Someone who's been where you want to go, and they're willing to guide you along the way. They have a vested interest in your success, right? They want to help you, not just give you advice, but introduce you to people, introduce you to their network. A good mentor-mentee relationship is pretty structured in that sense, where like in every relationship, everyone can find value in it. I don't know if I think that some of my mentors have been men, and that's been great. I think now that I have young children, and my life is different, I'm finding more female mentors now, only because they've been where I want to go with young children, and that requires different needs. But I don't know if I necessarily think because I'm a female, I need a female mentor. I think you just need someone who will be an advocate for your career path and an advocate for your success. I think just 2 important points to note is that your mentor doesn't always have to be physical. They don't always have to be right here, someone who you can meet with and have breakfast with. That's convenient and certainly wonderful, but a lot of the people I consider mentors, I follow on Instagram, and I watch their YouTube videos, and I read their books, and I feel like I know them. I generally feel like if I met them in a crowd, I would know them and they would know me, but they're far, far away. But those type of people have impacted me so much more than some local mentors who I've worked with. I also want to point out that being a mentee is a responsibility. I'm asked to be a mentor a lot, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity, but lots of times mentors, we don't have a magic wand, right? We can't just make anybody successful. I think a mentee has to come to a relationship with direction and questions and kind of an understanding of what they want and need out of the relationship, so we can help kind of drive it more. It should be very active on both sides for it to be effective and efficient.
Can you tell us a few of those mentors that you follow on Instagram, or that you love from afar?
Yep. I'm a big Tony Robbins fan. I'm a big Gary Vaynerchuk fan, minus all the swearing he does. I'm a big Brendan Bouchard fan, Tom Bilyeu, Malcolm Gladwell fan. Thank you. A lot of those guys I would consider to be my friends, as I refer to them at work. Everyone knows that I refer to my friends when I need to do a mental push-up, when I need a mental vitamin. Those are the guys that I turn to.
Would either of you ladies be able to share some mentors, maybe that you love from afar or close up that?
I just want to change the dialogue just a little bit on the word mentor and use a different thing that I have used as I have sort of developed over the years, and that's the word teacher. So if you look up the definition of mentor, right, it usually has a very positive connotation. So when I change the word teacher, it's because I'm taking out some of the positives of a mentor. I really believe that you can learn so much by those around you that you don't like how they operate. And you're going to get into the workforce, and you might already be in the workforce, and you're going to see people and you're going to go, oh my God, how did they get that job? And those are some of your best teachers. Again, it's not about like complaining and going, oh God, what a creep, although of course you might say that. But it's really about why, analyzing it, right? Why don't you like that person? What are they doing that you don't respect? How are people reacting to that person and why? And those were my best teachers, and no, I'm not giving you those names. But I learned so much about what I didn't want to be and why I didn't like it. So I just analyzed what they were doing, and I said, that won't be me. I will work hard for it. So just expand teachers to also be those that are not ones that you want to emulate.
You talked a lot about, you're so right about this, having your antenna up around communication and just observation. Holy heck, I mean, when you walk into a room too, where oftentimes, and you are you're the only woman or the whatever, but to sit down and just start asking people about what they do and their background, this whole platform around just learning. I've had great men and women mentors too, and that provides great networking and learning opportunities and role modeling. But just keeping your ears and eyes open about how people have gotten to where they've gotten from. Everybody's got a story to tell, and there's always something to discover about that. And that goes for, regardless of gender, is just asking a lot of people questions and having open ears. Because you do observe a lot, and you cue onto even words people use, or phrases people use, or the way that they interact, the body language that they have. And you pick that up, and those things can be things that you just kind of maybe tuck in the back of your mind, and like, oh, I'm going to use that sometime, or I'm definitely not going to use that sometime, because not only do you see what they're doing, but you also look about how everyone else is reacting. Because part of leadership too is getting everyone to sort of follow you, and if you can't get that, then you're on an island somewhere. And so having that antenna up and just that constant, okay, what can I get out of this situation? Or maybe, why am I here? Then you're like, wait a minute, there's something here to learn. I just don't know what it is yet. And keep being open to that is really, really critical.
I just want to add, this whole learning experience is very important, and I think a big part of it is self-reflection. We all make mistakes, and we all have bad days, and we all have had problems that somebody has had to sit us down and say, you know what, this isn't working the way it should be, or I don't like the way you're doing X. I spent a lot of my time in my younger years being defensive about those things. And in the corporate world, I realized that I really needed to take a step back and look in the mirror. What is it that they're saying to me? And how do I improve myself? So learning isn't just, like you're saying, you learn a lot by watching people's behaviors and all those things you don't want to be. But then also, you also have to take a step back, because learning is a part of your own personal experience as well. And you make those mistakes, you don't want to keep making the same mistakes over and over and over. You have to move forward. So really taking that step back, taking that look in the mirror, and doing that personal inventory is very, very important to continuously do, so that you as an individual can grow. And really, by doing that, and if people know that you're doing that, they respect you. Those are the people, they will follow you. They say, that's a good leader. This person isn't trying to come off as being perfect. They're human beings too. They're right in there with us. They're one of me. They realize that they make mistakes and that they're not perfect. And I think it's very, very important in a leadership role to, you don't have to be perfect. It's okay.
But also, but I think what I love about what you're saying is if they see you self-reflect and you say, oh God, did I just make a mistake? You just set the tone for everyone in the organization to self-reflect and say they're sorry and become better. So it's so important to openly self-reflect and say, look, that was just, I need to circle back there. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. Whatever, whatever, whatever. But then all of a sudden now it's the environment where I'm sorry. I could do better. By the way, we all need to work every day. That really is an important quality to set for the environment. I love that.
I really love all of your answers. And I think that we have a lot of mentors here. We have a lot of managers. One of the managers from our student-run business is here. So I think this next question is really going to speak to them. And Jennifer, I'm going to have you start off with it. And it's going to say, what types of activities did you do in college that significantly prepared you for this leadership position that you're in right now?
We talked a little bit before about this. Lee runs the dairy center cafe. I mentioned earlier that serendipitously, the job that I had in college was running the travel agency for Harvard Student Agencies. And I just like travel. I thought it was going to be fun. We sold backpacks and Eurail passes and Let's Go travel books and sent the research writers out every summer. And it was a blast. And so it was a fun industry. And I was getting income and I could pay for my books and going out and that kind of thing. And little did I know that that passion that I had at a young age could be translated into a career opportunity. So I guess that was a lesson to say, kind of reflecting yourself about what you really love to do and what you get passionate and excited about, not what you feel like you have to do. Because maybe there's a career opportunity out there. I always thought hospitality was more sort of, bellmen and waitresses and that sort of thing. I didn't know that I could do something like this professionally. And it's really fun. But the other things I would say is, when I think back about the different activities I was involved in, it mainly revolved around some form of student government. And a lot of that was about working through people and getting people on board and really listening to, if you will, your constituents, right? Or your team or your classmates or whatever that case might be. And how can you advance an idea that comes from a need that they're articulating in a way that kind of rallies everybody. And I feel like I fall back on that all the time. It's a lot of communication, it's a lot of listening, it's a lot of getting out there, and now a lot of my time is frankly on that communication. It's sort of, as we become a bigger company, I spend a ton of my time just going to meetings and listening and telling people over and over again what we're doing and what's going on, because it's like advertising 24/7. You've got to always be reminded, as all these distractions are out there, what path we're going down. And being able to work in an association through other people to get to an end goal is the way that for me, has been my style and my strategy. And a lot of that comes from back to high school and college and learning how to work in a team across an organization. Because there's always be people out there, and God knows, especially in my case, that will be much smarter and can solve the analytical challenge. But you got to get the whole organization behind you, and so the more opportunities that you have in your classwork with people working on teams, and I really applaud all that effort here, but in an organization where you can take a leadership role provides all those opportunities in spades.
I have one more question that a professor actually gave to me. She wasn't able to be here, but I'm just going to put it out on the table, and whoever would like to answer first, feel free. It says, as a woman, how have you promoted innovative change in your industry? As a woman, how have you promoted innovative change? Is there anything that you, being a woman, brought in that maybe a male was in your position before and didn't didn't do, and you came in and you changed the dynamic of your office or your company?
I think there's not enough emphasis on emotional intelligence or on self-reflection, on kind of the softer side of business as what we're calling it, and especially in financial services. That's very numbers driven, very hard and fast. It's black or it's white, it's green or it's red. I think I introduced kind of the concept of paying more attention to your own mindset, how you're making people feel, how you're making yourself feel, how you're making others feel, and applying that towards business, realizing that you can get more out of people if you are appealing to their emotions more, which just makes for a better, more efficient organization. So when I first presented on it, I kind of presented and ran because I didn't really want to know what people thought of it, or I thought I was going to get like tomatoes off the stage. But it was really, really well received. And then people come to me privately and share their private stories about how my story, my presentation impacted them. So that would give me confidence to present again, and present again, and present again, all within my company. And now I'm happy to say, not that emotional intelligence and behavioral finance is innovative at all, obviously, but to my firm, it was a little bit new. We didn't really talk like that. That wasn't our language. And I think because I was persistent, to Suzanne's point, it's now kind of ingrained in our culture, and I'm very proud of that because it has affected people very differently, and it has changed people for the better in a lot of different ways. And I think it came from myself knowing it was important, me having the passion to know that what I was talking about was right, even if everybody in the room didn't necessarily agree with me. If I left the room with just one person shaking their heads, I'd feel really good, and that would give me enough confidence and motivation to get another person shaking their heads about it.
When I think about the word innovative, I don't necessarily, I agree with you, it really is not a female-male thing. Like, you have to be innovative in any leadership position, and a leader could be, you're running a department of 1 or 1,000. So you have to be innovative, whether it's product development, senior leadership development, sustainability, community, messaging. It's all about being innovative. And then you're going to do it with your own style. And you said it, we all have our own styles. You can't have one style. So if you happen to be a person that's going to be bringing into the room, male or female, maybe a more thoughtful approach to having a deeper conversation about some of the personal nuances that get in the way of business, then that's innovative, right? We had a particular individual at Bigelow that really wasn't working well, and I was trying a lot of very aggressive ways to deal with it, and it really wasn't working for that person or for me. And then, that's when I kind of do that self-reflection to go, okay, nobody's winning on this. I'm going to bring an innovative way of having this conversation. And we're going to talk heart to heart. And we're going to talk about what I'm seeing and what I possibly think you're seeing. I can't really look through your eyes, but I can maybe make some assumptions and you can correct me. So that really helped me get over sort of when I became the CEO, sort of determining who I really was as a CEO, not just as a person, and bringing that innovative way of having very difficult conversations has really helped the organization. So that's the way I guess I would use the word innovative from that perspective.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We have one question from the audience as well, from Christina Magliocco. She's a finance major here, and she's a senior, and she's asking, have you ever struggled working in teams, and how did you handle being a team player?
Yeah, sure, we all do. Right, exactly. No, because I think anytime you walk into a team, especially when you don't know someone, right? Just in this room today, we all want to make sure that we come across and sound like we know what we're talking about and be confident. And so there's this balance of wanting to sort of, be assertive, but yet listen. And so it took me a really long time to just get confident enough to just shut up and listen to what was going on and realize my role might be more of a facilitator than coming up with the answer. And I think when you get to that point and you can help others on a team kind of just sort of put down their kind of ego a bit and just say, okay, we have a problem. We all have different skills and strengths. How are we going to work together to do this? It's breakthrough, but it takes a lot of time. And there's a lot of work that neurologically has been done around teams. Say once you can get kind of that fear element out of it, you literally activate your frontal lobe. Like otherwise, if you're just always worrying about impressing and kind of, on your guard, you never get out of that sort of fear, that sort of fundamental raw part of your brain. And it's only when you can kind of put your guard down that you create that safe space where people can open up and talk about what's on their minds, that you get to kind of higher level outcomes. But it takes a while, and a lot of it I think is rooted in confidence and setting a tone. And I think each of you can play that, because then people go, oh well, look, someone's at least trying, and it doesn't become like this rugby scrum of kind of who's got the ball kind of thing.
I also say sometimes it's hard on teams because you have very different dispositions, and you have very different people that somebody wants to get the job done immediately and someone wants to get it done at the last minute. And I think college is a very challenging team environment, and I don't know if there's an easy answer. Maybe it's that innovative conversation on maybe heart to heart on it. But it is difficult, so it is trying to do the best you can to find out what's your skill set. So if your skill set is marketing and your skill set is finance, can you at least talk about what your strength is and then say, can you bring that to the table, and just try to have those conversations about deadlines. But you really aren't the boss in any kind of setting in a team, so it already, especially if the teams are sort of set for you. So teams are hard. It's just trying to do the best you can, and the nuggets that you get from working in a team in college, I promise you, there'll be amazing nuggets later in life, because if you can work in a team in college, that you can work in a team anywhere.
That was a great question, thank you. But I think that's what I was just going to say, that all this group work that you're doing in your classes, it's definitely preparing you, because the team dynamic will always be your most challenging dynamic, no matter if you're here or in the corporate world.
Wonderful. Did you ladies have any last minute thoughts before we conclude and move up to our networking portion of this that you wanted to share
I
with?
just want to say one thing about
Please do.
college in general.
Please do.
Because it's such a great, this is the right breeding ground, even though people don't always understand that. It is the right breeding ground for who you're going to be later in life. So a lot of times when you talk to students, they'll say, gee, I don't really like that professor, or I don't like that assignment, and they possibly, I can't say for any of you in this room, they don't tend to give it their all. It's not uncommon for people to say, I didn't really like that teacher, I didn't really like that class, so I didn't really work that hard, or I didn't go to class. Okay, that's the real world. But what I'm going to say is, when you get into the working world, and many of you might be there, you're going to have that boss you don't like. You're going to have that assignment you don't like. You're going to have that meeting you don't like. You don't get the luxury of not going, so you better get used to it in college. Just go to this dumb class with a ridiculous teacher. But it's really great for later in life, and the more you can try to get from it and do well in it, and just give it your all anyway, oh my God, you are going to be so much further along than the next person next to you in that business environment, because you don't worry about that my boss and the assignment. You just do what you got to do. So that's my only message to college. It's such a great breeding ground for that.
Anybody else? Any last thoughts? Any last nuggets?
Only because it was fresh in my mind 48 hours ago. Meet the people that you're sitting next to and spend a lot of time with them. I was just with about 60 of my classmates from college on Saturday, and some I knew really, really well, and some I didn't. But what I found is there's all these connections, and there's all these ways that we've started to help each other now in our careers, in ways that we just would have never helped each other out in college. Or didn't know that we had a passion or interest about that. And so these relationships that you're building really do last a lifetime, and you have an opportunity to continue to nurture that, because this perhaps may be your best team and your best networking opportunity, your best mentoring role. So do absorb that and make those partnerships and make those friendships and make those relationships, because you just never know when they're going to come up again in a really positive way that's going to help you in your career.
Actually, someone just snuck me a last minute question. I think it's a really good one. I'd like to hear it from you ladies. Can you talk about being a mother and the balance, that work-life balance. Who's going first?
I'll go first,
All right,
since I haven't
great.
said anything in a little while. So, yes, it's definitely a struggle to have that work-life balance, and talking to other business leaders, I think it's important for companies to offer more flexibility now with the technology that's available. People can work from anywhere, and you're really working 24/7 if you're in any type of a management role, because you're always connected to the world. But the flexibility is important, and I don't only say this for women. I think it's very important for men to have time with their families as well. I see that in many corporations, men give up tremendous amounts of time away from their families to do what's needed for the company, missing important parts of their child's development and family, and this leads to separation and problems. But I also find that when you give to employees, male or female, some flexibility and the time to be with their families, it comes back to you because they're stressed out, they need that time, they're juggling their families. Not only, if they're not happy at home, they can't be productive in the work environment. So it's very, very important to have a work-life balance. And of course, women have that a little bit more on their plate because the family and the home does fall on them more. But I think it's also important to give men the opportunity, not only for themselves, but I think it makes them better leaders because they have a better understanding of the world around them as well.
Thank you for sharing. One last question. Can you comment on women in networking situations, how to approach men, or how to not be intimidated to approach other women, maybe someone who's just starting off? How do we approach someone who's at a higher position, and how do you gain the confidence to go up to them and talk to them? Something on that aspect of networking. What are some suggestions that you would say in those roles? How do you gain the confidence to go up to someone that may be different from you or at a higher level?
I will just say that I come across as sometimes a pretty outgoing person, but I have to say every time I walk into a room like that, I'm terrified. And people are really, yeah. And I honestly, I look across the room, I take a really deep breath, and I'm like, there's going to be someone here I'm going to learn from. I don't know who it is, so let's just go. And it really is, for me, I'm pretty happy sort of sitting in the corner and just kind of observing. That would be really a happy evening for me. But to know that there's going to be something out there that I'm going to walk away with a new friend, a new relationship, a great story, something like that. And so for me, a lot of it is mindset and literally taking that deep breath and just going in, putting out your hand and saying, hi, I'm Jennifer, who are you? What do you do? And just starting a conversation. And also just frankly keeping a good sense of humor about it all. Because there's also in some of these things, people will walk away or they'll do something else. And you just gotta have to go, okay, well, let's try again. And just have, for me it takes a lot of work. But inevitably I'm always glad that I tried at the end of the day.
Yeah, just to add to that, just ask them a question. People love for you to ask them a question. Welcome, she's saying blah, 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 and then as soon as you ask them a question, they have to answer you.
I mean, social media helps. Social media is fun, but it's also a luxury. You can know a lot about a person. You can find commonality in a person long before you meet them. So to be able to walk in with somebody and say, oh my gosh, we sit on the same board together, or I appreciate the Alzheimer's Foundation as well as you do. Can you tell me about your role there? So it's a luxury to be able to Google somebody really quick before you walk into a room, and that can always help kind of break a wall down or break down some ice to make you feel more comfortable.
I think that was a great nugget and a way to end this panel. We are going to move up to the Martiri Forum. I'm just going to ask everyone to just stay seated while our speakers are escorted up to the Martiri Forum, and we're going to have some little finger foods. And thank you so much. Can we hear it for our wonderful speakers today? They really appreciate all the nuggets. Thank you so much. Our ladies can come and just take.
You don't move. There you go.
I dash really briefly. I totally forgot your name.
Okay, but I also want you to notice everybody. Where are all the guys sitting? That side. Al top. You can mingle. It's up to you.
Yeah, I actually helped. I needed this.
I know.